Preface. I'm happy to have the honor of writing a short introduction to this pamphlet because Mrs. Montefiore takes the same position I took in my last book on socialism, a book I dedicated to Mother. I truly believe that the future depends on women who are respected, educated, and free. Real morality in England won't be possible until the law no longer allows women to be mistreated, starved, or bought and sold. England will only become a truly great nation when women are healthy, fearless, and free, when they have full control over their own lives, their own love, and their own souls. Votes for women? Absolutely. I support votes for all women. But votes are only as useful in politics as guns are in war. If women use their votes against socialism, they will be using their own power to fight against their own freedom. Only through socialism can women gain the respect, happiness, and independence they deserve. Only through socialism can they take their rightful place beside men. The purpose of this pamphlet is to encourage women to study socialism, to understand what it truly means and where it can lead them. Once they learn that, the votes will come naturally. And I will say here, just as I have said before, that if we had 1 million women who were truly committed to this cause, then we would be certain of victory, whether they had the right to vote or not. Because character and passion matter more than votes. In this country, public opinion is what really makes a difference. And the power of informed and passionate women to shape public opinion is impossible to measure. The common people are strong at heart, and among them, the most kind and noble are the mothers. If we can help those mothers understand what socialism means for them and for their children, then their great love and the deep sense of idealism that has always existed in the hearts of true women will bring the best mothers of England into the socialist movement. When that happens, victory will be within reach. And once that victory comes, no child in England will ever again be unloved, uneducated, or hungry. No woman will be a servant, a slave, or a possession among free men. The people will finally begin to truly live. And one day, a stronger, better generation will look back on our time and wonder, with sadness, why we were so cruel, so selfish, and so afraid. I hope that women will read this powerful pamphlet, think about it carefully, and, before long, join the socialist cause, bringing victory not just to themselves, but to the men and women who, more than anyone else in this nation, truly love, respect, and honor mothers. Robert Blatchford. December, 1907. Some words to socialist women. The one thing that will always speak to every socialist woman, no matter how long she has been part of the movement, no matter how much she has studied its ideas, and no matter if she works for socialism at home among neighbors or speaks out for it in front of a world that does not care or is even hostile, is the idea of motherhood. Some socialist women may think that starting this pamphlet with motherhood seems old-fashioned, especially since we hope to share it with non-socialists to show them what we are fighting for now and in the future. But when I explain that I am not talking about motherhood in the usual way, as something only personal, but in a socialist way, as something that includes not just raising children, but also caring for them through education, guidance, and helping society as a whole, then those who understand socialist ideas will see that this is a new and powerful message for all women. Let's look at this idea more closely. Giving birth to a child is not enough to raise and prepare that child to be a good and responsible member of society. Giving birth is only the first step. After that, teaching, guiding, and shaping the child's character are just as important. In fact, many women who never have children of their own take part in these other kinds of motherhood. Women who teach, who take care of orphaned or abandoned children, and who work in public service all play a role in raising the next generation. Under capitalism, where only a few people own most of the wealth and power, every woman who cares about motherhood must suffer daily when she sees so many children growing up without the love, food, clothes, and safe homes that others have. No real mother can feel at peace just because her own children are safe while so many others are not. If seeing the suffering of so many children under capitalism does not make mothers realize that something is deeply wrong with our society, then it shows how much harm has been done by traditional religion, traditional morals, and traditional ideas about society. We, as socialist women, call on all mothers, including those who believe that Christianity can change people's hearts and make them treat each other fairly. We ask them to look at what their own religion teaches and to think about how many of the people in power should have a great weight tied around their necks and be thrown into the sea for what they allow to happen to children in the slums, alleys, and villages. Under socialism, this terrible suffering will end. Every child, from the moment they are born, will have the same opportunities and advantages as any other child. Right now, motherhood suffers because working-class children must start earning money before they are strong enough or have finished their education. This does great harm to society, as thousands of underfed and overworked children are forced to balance work and learning, even though their young bodies and minds cannot handle it. Under socialism, only adults, those over 21, would work for the community. This would allow young people to fully develop their bodies, minds, and character, making them stronger and better prepared for life. Motherhood also suffers because, when boys and girls grow up, they face the dangers of the streets and the temptations of alcohol, which is sold for profit, not for their well-being. Wealthy families can protect their children from the worst of this, but most young people are only offered pleasures designed to make money for rich brewery owners and landlords. Right now, mothers cannot clean up the streets the way they clean up their own homes. But under socialism, places of entertainment will exist for the real joy and benefit of the people, not for greedy businessmen. The loving care of mothers will extend beyond their own homes, following their sons and daughters through the most difficult years of their youth, guiding them with wisdom and kindness. Motherhood, as things are now, is deeply hurt and made powerless when grown sons and daughters cannot find work in their own country. They must either suffer through slow hunger and hardship or be sent away by emigration agents who make money from people's desperation. Under socialism, mothers would no longer have to live with the pain of knowing that the child they love, feed, and protect, whom they would give their life for if needed, might one day have no choice but to beg for help, break rocks in a workhouse, or even commit a crime just to be sent to prison, the only place where they can find food and shelter. Isn't it also an insult to motherhood under capitalism when mothers are told to bring children into the world only for them to grow up and be sent to fight in wars for the benefit of businessmen and rulers? Their sons are trained to unalive the sons of other mothers, in battles started by kings and emperors. Socialism, at its heart, believes in international unity, and this spirit of brotherhood among nations will end the greed-driven fights over land and money. In the future, socialism will help all people live together in peace. And what about the elderly? Who better understands how to care for the old than a mother, who has spent her life looking after others? But under capitalism, only a lucky few receive love and care in their later years. Most elderly people from the working class either feel like a burden to their already struggling families, or they starve in tiny, dark rooms. Others are sent off to the feared workhouse, where they are treated as if they are no longer useful. Under socialism, collective motherhood would make sure that people only work up to a certain age. After that, just like the wealthy elderly do now, they would be cared for by the community, either with their families or living in shared homes with others their age, but always with dignity. This is why I have chosen motherhood as the guiding idea in explaining socialism from a woman's point of view. The more kind, loving, and thoughtful a mother is, the more she should want to fight for socialism, replacing the disorder of capitalism with something better. Socialism is not just a set of strict rules, nor is it a belief to be accepted without thought. It is a way of looking at the facts of life from the perspective of the people who suffer under the current system but are growing stronger and demanding change. To explain these facts clearly and show what motherhood under capitalism is forced to become, let me start by reminding you that out of the 43 million people in our country, 1/3, 14 million people, live in extreme poverty. In simple words, this means that 1 out of every 3 people does not have enough food to eat or enough clothes to wear. What kind of motherhood can exist under these conditions? What kind of home life is possible when a mother never knows from one weekend to the next how much money she will have to buy bread, milk, or scraps of meat? How can a home be a place of love and safety when Monday morning brings the terrifying knock of the landlord demanding rent, and the mother is forced to leave her home, no matter the weather, to stand in line at the pawn shop at dawn, trading away something precious just to get by? How can love and warmth survive in a home like this? How can a mother receive the care and support she deserves during times of sickness and struggle when the world is so cruel to those who are poor? The way society is built now, the strong and rich thrive while the weak and poor are crushed in the daily fight for survival. Let me share something I wrote about a powerful moment in November 1905, when women who had no jobs and no food marched together. They went to speak to Mr. Balfour, who was in charge at the time. These starving women stood in the middle of a city full of wealth, hoping for help. His answer? "You have my sympathy, but what can I do?" Now, years later, there is a different leader in charge, but the wives and children of poor, struggling workers are still hungry while others have more than they need. Back then, I wrote about what I saw. 1 out of every 3 or 4 women in that march carried a small, weak baby in her arms. Sometimes, one mother would pass her child to another, just to get a small break from the weight. Both the women and the babies stayed quiet and patient, not because they wanted to, but because hunger and suffering had trained them to be. When people go without food for long enough, when they struggle in silence for years, it takes away their strength to fight back. If you want to understand what it took for these women to gather in the street and show the world their suffering, you have to think about how long they had been going without food, how long they had kept up the appearance of having a normal home even after selling off their furniture and clothing piece by piece. You have to imagine how hard it was for them to go to the local authorities and admit that they had nothing left, that they needed help to keep their children alive. When a woman has lost everything, when all her strength is used up, that is when her true soul, her mother's soul, is finally revealed, if anyone cares enough to look. If you really see them, if you really understand, you will realize that behind their tired, thin, swollen faces are women who have sacrificed more than most people could ever imagine. These are women who give up their own food for their children, who push through hunger and exhaustion to keep their families together. They do things that many wealthy women could never dream of doing. This is what I call mutilated motherhood. This is the suffering, the punishment, that so many women in England are forced to endure. And yet, even as they struggle, the country still expects them to raise strong, proud citizens for its empire. So, what is it that the people of England really want? What is it that you, the hard-working mothers of the working class, need to make sure that millions of workers get their fair share of wealth, comfort, and education? First, you need the land of England, the land that has been taken from you. Next, you need the machines, the workshops, and the factories to belong to the people, so that you can start right away growing food, making clothes, and building houses, not to make profits for the 5 million rich people who take half the country's income, but for the use of everyone. Then, you also need to take control of the railways, the ships, and the canals, so that you can use them as freely as you use the roads today. That way, you can transport food, clothes, and building materials to the places where they are needed most. Everything that is grown and made should be for the use of all people, not just to bring in money for a few. This is the only way to truly fix unemployment, get rid of the slums, and make sure no child goes hungry. The 5 million rich people already know this, and that's why they do everything they can to keep the 14 million workers who are struggling and underpaid from learning about it. Every winter, they put on a great show of generosity, giving what the newspapers call magnificent donations to help the poor. But for the rest of the year, these same rich people are the ones creating the poverty they pretend to care about. Don't be fooled, you women for whom I write. Don't believe the stories about these wonderful acts of charity. When one of you, with barely enough money for your own family, gives a penny to someone even poorer than yourself, or when a mother among you shares a piece of bread and butter with a hungry child next door, you are giving far more than any rich person who writes a check for £10,000 to a charity. Never forget that the person writing that check, along with 5 million others, is taking half of the country's wealth every single year. Write these facts down in simple numbers. Talk about them with your husbands, teach them to your children, and keep thinking about them. Go to socialist meetings, ask questions, and listen to the answers that will make you think even more. And when you have done all this, you will see that the only real solution to the struggles you face as working-class mothers is socialism. The only people who are trying to help you in a lasting, meaningful way are the socialist leaders. But those leaders are waiting for something, the support of the millions of workers, men and women, who are barely getting any share of the wealth that belongs to them. Some people will try to tell you that socialists are bad people, that they don't believe in God, and that they want to ruin family life. But socialism, as I have already explained, is not a system or a belief. It is simply a way of understanding the facts about how working people are treated unfairly. Because of that, socialism has nothing to do with whether or not you believe in a personal God. Just like with food, where one kind may be good for one person but not for another, different people may believe different things about God. But socialism does not tell you what to eat or what to believe. What it does is make sure that everyone has access to the best food and the best education, so that no one suffers from bad food or from ignorance and false ideas. Socialism teaches that ignorance is the only real sin, that the time to be happy is now, and that the place to be happy is here. It shows how happiness can be reached if society is changed for the better. Don't be afraid of the word science. It just means the knowledge that people have gathered and organized over time. Since we all have to live in this world, it is only fair that we should have access to the best knowledge and be taught the most useful things people have learned. We socialists especially want you women to think for yourselves. Don't just believe something without looking into it when people say that religion has always been the best friend of women. Remember that in the Bible, Jehovah, the God of the Jews, is said to have told some men he was angry with, "Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will raise up evil against thee out of thine own house, and will take thy wives, before thy eyes, and give them unto thy neighbor." What kind of view did that God have of women if he used them only as a way to punish men? He didn't seem to care at all about the terrible suffering and humiliation that those women had to go through. Use your own mind and think about this. Some people say that socialists are to blame for breaking up family life. It is true that family life is not what it used to be when I was young, and it has changed not only for working people but also for upper and middle class families. Many things are now made in factories, and many tasks are done by machines powered by steam or electricity, instead of by hand in the home. There are many places now where people can eat out in public, inexpensive restaurants, and these places are growing every day. All children must go to school, and soon many will even have one meal at school. Meanwhile, children from upper and middle classes go to boarding schools and have all their meals away from home. Also, girls who used to help their mothers at home for free now work in factories, shops, or restaurants and earn money. All these changes take people away from home and seem to make family bonds less strong than before. But this does not mean that love and care at home have disappeared. Those deep feelings stay inside people no matter what outside changes occur. Socialists have nothing to do with these slow, natural changes in family life. Instead, the changes come from economic causes, the same causes that make the ideas of socialism so important. If you have read history, you know that society was not always set up the way it is now. Even the usual ways people relate to each other as men and women were different. In the time of the Greeks and Romans, workers were slaves and belonged to their masters. Later, when slavery became unprofitable, these workers became serfs who were tied to the land and had to work it for their masters, although they were not bought and sold like slaves. Then came industrialism, which led to wage slavery. In that system, men and women are free to work if a capitalist employer has a job, and free to starve if there is no work. But through all these changes, working women have always been in a worse position than working men because they have suffered an extra kind of slavery, the slavery of their own sex. Their bodies have never been fully their own to use as they choose. As socialist ideas spread, private property in everything, even wives, will disappear, and women of all classes will truly own themselves. If you think about it, you will recall the many reasons, besides love, why women often marry today. You will then see how differently a future woman, who is economically free, will think about sharing her life with a man who is also free. Many women marry now because they need a home, believing that a man will provide it and make their lives easier than working for themselves or relying on family. But under capitalism, a man soon finds it very hard to earn enough money for himself, his wife, and his children. Then, the woman is often forced to take any low-paying, unorganized work just to keep hunger away. Under socialism, all women who bear children, a very important role in the community by giving it healthy future citizens, will be supported by the community, just as everyone else who works for the community will be. I write healthy children because in a socialist commonwealth, even motherhood will be studied and treated scientifically, and both men and women will learn how to be good parents. In future relationships, the most important thing for the community will be the children that come from those unions. Since the community is responsible for supporting children, it has the right to demand that children are born healthy. For relationships that do not result in children, the community will not interfere much, because that will be part of people's private lives. And when people are grown up, the government will have little to do with their private lives. Remember, my women friends and comrades, that our race is growing up and becoming aware of its destiny, and an important part of that destiny is shown in our roles as mothers and fathers. Once we win adult suffrage, which is very near if the people show they really want it, all laws must focus less on controlling personal lives and more on managing the common affairs of the people. We, as a mature and aware people, will direct our own lives and work together to manage our own community. I have already said that economic questions, like wages, the supply of jobs, and work opportunities, always affect the morals of the day. To show this, I want you working women to notice how differently a domestic servant who has a child out of wedlock is treated today compared to 20 or 30 years ago. In the past, an unmarried domestic servant who became a mother was said to lose her character, making it nearly impossible for her to find new work. Her mistress and society would often force her into a workhouse, where she would have to work without pay for years. Today, good servants, especially good cooks, are much rarer and more valuable. So if a modern mistress sees that an excellent servant might become a mother, she usually sends her away until the child is born, helps her find proper care for the child, and often takes the servant back. As you can see, economic conditions have changed how middle-class people judge actions that go against old-fashioned morals. You may now start to see that it is these new economic changes that are slowly changing our ideas, our laws, and our everyday lives. These changes come from outside of us, and all we can do is try to understand them and help others understand what is causing them. Some women today are getting it wrong. They feel the heavy weight of the old economic ways and, forgetting that this weight falls on poor men as much as on poor women, they try to start a fight between the sexes instead of fighting for fairness between all working people. This wrong view of things is coming back to hurt them. We can see it because wherever these leaders who blame men hold meetings, no one listens. They make the mistake of stirring up an emotional form of feminism instead of offering a clear plan to help everyone. The working-class woman has been the first to see through this shallow talk, and every day more working-class women join the fight for equal voting rights for all people. To show you a clear example of how working-class motherhood is treated now, even though the rich newspapers like to write about sacred motherhood and the beauty of home, let me tell you about a home in the East End of London where a working woman friend of mine lives. Then you can decide for yourself whether it is the ideas of socialism or the forces of capitalism that are hurting motherhood and home life. My friend is raising 8 lovely children in a shabby brick building, called a house, on a rough street in the crowded East End of London, a place where no rich woman who owns pet dogs would ever let those pets live even one day. For this old, worn-out shelter that they have to call home, the parents pay 1/3 of their weekly earnings, and they even have to take in a lodger to help pay the rent. As soon as the children are old enough by law to work, they must sell newspapers, work in laundries until 9 at night, or do other low-paying, disliked jobs in busy London. The mother has done everything she can since the children were born, and even though they live in terrible conditions, the children are lovely and beautiful. But what help does this woman get in her daily struggle, in her endless round of hard, boring housework in a home that no one could ever make clean or cozy? Does the community care that she is raising 8 healthy, strong future citizens? No, under the present system, the community never helps her, never gives her praise or encouragement, and never provides a fair share of the basic things needed for life. If she were a bad mother, if she let her children die by feeding them from dirty bottles instead of breastfeeding, or if she spent her husband's small wage at the pub instead of stretching it to feed all 10 hungry mouths, the community would punish her. But if she is a good mother, she still gets nothing but hardship. Now, imagine what life would be like under socialism. My friend's 8 children would have the same good conditions and advantages as all the other children in the country. The clothes made would be for everyone's benefit, all the nice and useful things now shown in shop windows for the joy of a few rich mothers and babies would come from community stores for the benefit of all mothers and babies. Schools would be for all children, and no child would be forced to leave school to work before they were strong and healthy enough. All the old, horrible slums, alleys, and dark, stinky courts would vanish, and my friend and her children would live in a real house where the little ones could learn from their earliest days what the comfort and beauty of home life mean. The current system of public restaurants would be organized and improved so that those who eat out know that the food served by the community is clean and healthy, thanks to the careful, scientific teaching of social motherhood. The walls of the community restaurants would be decorated with the best art that socialism can support, and pleasant, soft music would play during meals, just as it does now in the fancy restaurants of the West End where the rich gather. Can you imagine how different the life of the East End mother I have described would be? Don't you believe that this is an ideal worth working and even suffering for? And don't all you working women, who believe, as I do, that your children should have the same chances as other children, want to work and fight for this ideal? Some of our first practical goals must be to win voting rights for all women and all men and to make sure that no child goes hungry at school. When you working-class mothers take to the streets and demand these great reforms, showing the government that you mean to have them, it will not be long before you get them. Do not think, my dear women friends, that these are just silly dreams of the future I am sharing with you. Remember that most smart men and women today are writing and speaking for socialism in every country, and each country is helping the others in the struggle to give the world to the workers. In closing, I want to share with you the words of a thinker who has helped me a great deal with his ideas over the past 20 years. I feel happy knowing he is one of the professors at London University, where he influences the minds of young men and women every day, young people who may one day see our socialist ideals come true. He says, "To those who think these ideas are just idle dreams and not possible in the future, I can only say, look carefully at the strong forces at work in our time. Notice the power of the men and women who are unhappy with the way things are, and see how passionate the teachers of our new way of life, both in our social life and our ideas about relationships, are. Then you will not think of them as mere dreamers. For those who want to know what they should do now, I say, the first steps toward our ideal are to spread socialism as a way of life and to completely free our sisters. For those who, like an old poet, stop and feel weak, seeing only small-mindedness and greed in our great time, we must say a sad but firm goodbye. Father, you do not understand our needs. Your work is finished, stay and rest while we move on. Goodbye. We are full of new feelings, new passions, and new ideas. Our time is not about pettiness and greed, it is filled with clearer and nobler ideas than before, ideas that the men will create and the women will bring to life. Yes, there are dangers and many difficulties, misery, pain, and injustice. But we today look beyond these problems. They do not make us lose hope, but rather push us to take action. People in the past valued Christianity, and we value free thinking. They valued faith, and we value knowledge. They eagerly sought wealth, but we value the duty and right to work. They spoke about the sacredness of marriage, but we see it as love being treated like something to buy and sell, and we fight for freedom in relationships. Your symbols belong to the past, symbols that have given much to civilization, great landmarks in history that once pointed the way forward and even hinted at our future ideal. But as symbols for what we do today, they are empty. They now show that we are still trapped in old ways of thinking, working, and in our relationships. We have other ideals that truly belong to the coming ages: freedom of thought, freedom of work, and freedom in relationships. These come from a deeper understanding of human nature and its history than what you, our forefathers, had. Call these new ideals impious, irrational, or unclean if you want. It is only because you have not understood our time or us. We must sadly leave you behind and move forward on our own. Our age is full of knowledge and rich ideas. We believe the future is not far off, when our new symbols will guide our actions and their beauty will be shown to all through a rebirth of art.